Hello and welcome back to Made Possible by Pop Culture, the podcast that looks at influential pop culture of the past and present. Today, I am so excited to welcome Hallie Cantor to the podcast. Hallie is a writer known for her work on shows from Arrested Development and Inside Amy Schumer to Lady Dynamite and Dollface. But today is her pub day for her debut novel, Like This But Funnier. Ironically, the novel follows a TV writer who ends up selling a show based on one of her therapist husband's patient's dreams. And I know that sounds complicated and maybe also anxiety filled, but wait, there's more. She also ends up befriending that patient along the way. So we're obviously going to talk about the book, but we're also going to go back in time to the mid 1980s to talk about a meaningful movie to Hallie. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, obviously, welcome to Made Possible by Pop Culture. It's very nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So I want to start. I'm going to say this, and I know that some of the people listening might be rolling their eyes as I say this because I typically don't love to ask people the question like, when did you know or when did you first? But I do want to start that way with you because you're a writer of multiple mediums, and I want to know when you first decided you wanted to be a writer and when you first said, I want to be a writer. What type of writing did you think you wanted to do?
Wow. I mean, I always loved reading. And word puzzles, word play, that kind of stuff. I think I didn't know what I wanted to do for a really long time. In college, I was one of those people who was like, one week I'm a geology major, and the next week I'm a philosophy major, and I could not decide. I had an internship during college at a website called College Humor.
Yeah.
Um, which was a fantastic place full of like working comedy writers who were smart and funny and just people I wanted to hang out with. So that was kind of an early inkling of like maybe I could write funny stuff for a living. And I had done my high school newspaper. And I was like maybe I'll be a more straightforward writer or journalist or something. And the high school newspaper I was on took itself so seriously. They like had these editorial meetings where like people like the staff would be like up all night like arguing about like what our stance was going to be on like the faculty parking lot being repaved or like whatever dumb thing. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if I'm like smart enough or good enough at that to do that kind of thing. And then when I got to college, there was a satirical newspaper.
Hmm.
Um, in the vein of like The Onion. And those people seem to be having a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was kind of like, okay, I can use my writing skills, but also like help people not take themselves too seriously. And the comedy people were just the people that I wanted to be around and hang out with. So yeah, those early experiences, I think, kind of pointed me in the direction of comedy writing and trying to get into a TV writing room.
I just have to ask, did you go to high school back east?
Yes.
Okay, because I same, and I mean, I was on my high school newspaper for a little while. I was not taking it super seriously, even though I did go into journalism, but that just seems like the attitude back there. And I went to a public magnet school. I don't know where you went, but maybe it's a little bit different. It rang very true when
It
when
was
I was
so
hearing you say
life or
that.
death what our stance was going to be. It was at a private school and it was a
Okay.
weekly paper, which I think is like pretty uncommon for high schoolers. So it was impressive what they were doing, but I just felt like this, I don't know, this can't be that serious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, it also kind of makes sense that like if you have comedy in your bones or if you just like have something you want to say with that kind of an edge,
Yeah.
you're also probably going to look at some of the other stuff and just it's not going to feel right. You know, it
Yeah.
feels too serious, it feels like unnecessary, but it also just isn't the right tone, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And I think
Um,
I was better at the comedy stuff. It was something where I was like, oh, I can kind of do this and like maybe distinguish myself a little bit better when I'm like making a joke about the weird anxious thought I had rather than
right.
like trying to like really break a story.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Or even like take that weird anxious thought and like write something that's super deep and emotional. Like it's sometimes more cathartic, I think, to make the joke.
Totally.
And I do want to look at the world of pop culture when you're talking about going into, or you are talking about thinking about going into writing, because I'm curious if there was anything specific that started to seep into your brain in terms of, I love comedy. Now I kind of am going on a certain track. I'm following or I'm following might not be the right word in today's day and age. We think about social media, but I'm, keeping an eye on these people who have careers that I love or just types of comedy I want to emulate. Were there any people like that?
Gosh. Oh, I'm sure, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I was really into like shows like The Office and 30 Rock, when I was starting to think about getting into it. And related to what you said about emotion, like, The Office was a show that like there would be really emotional stuff happening on it and
Yeah.
like sort of deep like scenes that like almost made you want to cry, but it was mixed in with that um comedy and like just yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I also like there were a lot of stand-ups that I loved. I was a big fan always of Maria Bamford, whose show I
Yeah.
got lucky enough to work on, Lady Dynamite. But way before that, I was a fan of her stand-up because she was the first person I think I saw like taking these like kind of scary topics about like anxiety and mental
Hmm.
illness and really giving voice to them in a way that was just so funny and made it feel safe and made me feel like I'm less alone if I'm having these kinds of thoughts or feelings. So she was like a lodestar for me for sure.
Yeah.
God, I mean, I'm sure there were so many more
I
too.
mean, those are good examples. None of them are the example that, or the past pop culture pick you wanted to talk about in more
Oh, I
detail,
didn't
which
realize
is
you were just
fine. No,
setting
no,
me up
no,
to
no.
get into it.
I was not intentionally
Yeah,
setting
yeah.
that question up for you to say. I just wasn't sure if that would fall in line because so you picked Clue, which
Yes.
did come out in the 80s. So
Yes.
like, I'm assuming you didn't see it when it first came
I
out.
did not see it in
Okay.
theaters. No, I was not born yet.
Right, right. That's why I'm like, but that's what I find really interesting because sometimes when we find something later for its life,
Yeah.
I feel like it has a really interesting and unique impact on our lives because there's already discourse around it. When we see it for
Yes.
the first time, when everyone else is seeing it for the first time, you're creating the discourse, but it's a slightly different feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
So I just want you to kind of set up where you were in the world where you first saw it. And if that's true for you, if you feel like you maybe picked it out because people had
Yeah.
been talking about it.
Well, I think Clue is a really interesting example because it kind of had terrible discourse around it when it came out, as I learned later from like reading oral histories about it and stuff. Like people did not like it. It did terribly.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was to do with it has three endings, and when it was released in theaters, they showed one ending for each screening. And so people were like, I don't understand. Is this like the right ending? Like they thought that maybe people would like go back to see all three, but people were just like, no, screw this.
Right. Which
But
is fair. That is a lot. I will
yes,
say that's a lot to ask of any audience. Like,
no,
even if you are a huge fan, going back to see something three times in a
I wouldn't
theater.
do that for any movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know it was cheaper back then, but still, it's a lot.
Yeah. And well, I mean, when it's released on DVD and stuff, they show all three endings, which is
Right.
way more fun and satisfying. But so I didn't know any of that. I didn't know anything about, its reception or the discourse around it. I first saw it at a friend's house when I was like probably a little too young to understand any of it. And I remember being kind of like scared of it because it is sort of like a spooky, like it's a
Mhm.
comedy movie, but there are some genuinely scary moments. And I don't remember like connecting with it then, but then when I was in middle school, I think my mom like rented it for me when I was homesick, and I just like totally fell in love with it. And then I've seen it so many more times since then on, TV on reruns or on DVD, or in screenings, because there's really like this kind of cult
Hmm.
around it now where like people are diehard fans and can quote every line, and it's gotten this kind of like second life where I think everybody involved in it was sort of surprised that it's beloved now.
I know that there have been different feelings around those three endings in terms of like now that it's been released, as you mentioned, on DVD and streaming, they couch those endings or they phrase those endings in the how it could have happened, how about this, or how it could have happened alternative, and then here's what really happened. So they do feel like they're giving you something definitive, but they're still giving
Yeah.
you alternate versions. And as a fan of this movie, which one is your favorite ending? Which one is the one that you feel like that's just should be it? Like, even if
I
it's not the one they say is quote unquote
right.
how it really happened.
I think there. actually all fantastic. I don't even know if I could differentiate between them because they all have great comedy moments in that, like, the famous like flames on the sides of my face,
Yeah.
Mrs. White's speech, which is a lot of people's favorite part of the movie, is only in one of the endings. But I kind of feel like to get the full experience, you need to see all three endings because the playfulness of having all three um is part of the fun. And it's like, I love all kinds of murder mysteries like Agatha Christie books and Ryan Johnson movies, anything, because when you get that moment where like everything's finally explained and it all makes sense and the puzzle like clicks into place, that's such a fun feeling and so satisfying. But this movie gives it to you three times.
Right.
And I just think that's like such a gift and so delightful. And also like there's a silliness to it that feels relevant in my, kind of putting down my serious high school newspaper and
Mm.
joining the comedy paper where it's like it doesn't have to be so serious. It doesn't actually matter who murdered these people because it's a movie and it like the point is the jokes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just sort of love the embrace of nonsense that comes with having the three endings.
I mean, I do think that is a very nice attitude. I will say I'm a little insufferable. Like when I first watched this movie, I was like, it's gonna be so like I knew the game
Yeah.
first. So I was like, it's gonna be so obvious who did it based on what kind of wound this person has. So I was
Right.
like, and then I realized obviously, okay, there's multiple murders and there's so that does make it a little bit more complex. And then yes, as you mentioned, like it kind of doesn't really matter. And I am wondering if as you're going forward, maybe on multiple viewings of this movie as a fan, like also as a budding writer, are you watching it more for the jokes and the beats and like the interactions in the dialogue, or are you watching it like how to structure the story so that all of these endings could make logical sense when you go backwards and see those things like I'm talking about, like how that person was murdered?
Uh, no, I mean, I don't really write like, or I haven't yet written
Sure.
like locked house mystery. So I wouldn't say I'm watching it for, tips on how to structure that. I'm watching it just for the enjoyment of the jokes and the vibe and the performances. And I think something really special about the movie is that most of it is like all of the characters in a room together. And you rarely get that in a lot of comedies. It's like, you'll see one set of characters and then switch to another set of characters with a B story and then, go back to the first one and then like maybe they all come together by the end in like the dinner party scene or something where like everybody's storyline intersects.
Mm.
This movie is all made out of the dinner scene. Like all the characters are together like 90% of the time. And that's so rewarding because you can watch it over and over and sort of like pick up on new things, new reactions that people are giving, new like lines that are little asides. It feels like a very dense text in a way.
Yeah.
And that is the joke density too.
Yeah, I
So
was
I'm
gonna
just
say
really
also
watching and
just
enjoying that.
yeah, like the monologues, especially like at that end, like not even having to do three endings, but just even doing that first one before, if you don't realize there's going to be more, having watching Tim Curry run around and just like deliver the
Yes.
entire story. I mean, it's a little expositional, but at the same time, it's also like a real marvel of him as a performer.
Completely. It's like this exuberant virtuoso performance and I love that it's breaking the rules by being expositional, by showing you things you've already seen, and sort of explaining like, well, here's the part that you didn't see. They went through the secret passageway. It sort of feels like things are constantly being like unfolded and to surprise and delight you.
Yeah.
And he's having so much fun. They're all having so much fun, that it's really fun to watch.
You mentioned like the flames on the side of her face moment, which has become such a beloved meme and I think one of the more quotable pieces. Would you say that that's your favorite character? How does that
Oh my
change as
gosh.
you watch this film more than one time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I like necessarily relate to any of these characters because they're
Sure.
all kind of like
Nuts.
cartoony. Yeah, and which makes sense because they're based on literally just a color like on a game board.
Right.
But I don't know, there's something about the the writing these clearly defined characters and then the performances that are all amazing comedic performances. You really feel like you know who they all are and yeah, different things will tickle me on different watches for sure. Uh, yeah, I mean, they all have really great scenes and moments and jokes that are kind of their own thing that none of the other characters could do. And it's like delicious flavors in a soup that bring each other out. Yeah.
Do you find yourself like rewatching any particular moment or scene over and over, even if you're not watching the full film? Like, are you the type of viewer that goes back to pieces?
Typically not with
Okay.
this movie at least. Because when I watch part of it, I'm just like, well, let me just watch the next scene. I'll
That makes
it
sense.
just kind of like flows so seamlessly. Yeah, I mean, I love the scene where they're all sitting at dinner and they're like slurping their soup, but then I love when they're drinking the brandy. Like it just every scene is it's very consistent, I think.
Hmm. So then obviously this is going to lead me to how do you feel about a potential reboot? Because I don't know if you've ever worked with Dana Fox. I feel like you guys were around each other at the same time, but not necessarily on the same show at the same time, but she's working on a reboot. And I will say, speak for myself, I'm the kind of viewer of like, if I love something
Yeah,
as it is, I don't need your new version of it. And I don't think that's necessarily fair to the people who want to make a new version of it, but it takes a lot to win me over.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I have so much sentimental attachment to the first one that I don't think anything could ever replace it or recreate the same magic. But I'm definitely excited to see whatever this new version is because it might be, its own wonderful thing. Um, but yeah, I it's hard because when you love something, like I see the argument for like let's do it again. But I do think that the first version is like so perfect, and I don't know that it could be made today. But I was thinking about in thinking about coming on here and talking about it was that it's like it's something you see so often now that a movie will be based on a piece of IP that's like a board
Hmm.
game or something that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a narrative. And it almost feels like Clue is the exception to the rule in being an amazing one because
Right.
because often it feels like you're trying to like appeal to everybody who loved the game. It's like, oh, it has to be like a four quadrant thing where like
Hmm.
kids love it and adults love it and it doesn't offend anyone and it's not too talky and all of these rules that like Clue kind of breaks.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I really do think it was just sort of like this lightning in a bottle thing.
I
Uh,
mean, this does lead me to a thought based on your book of like sometimes you have this IP
yeah.
and the thing they make really has nothing to do with it. Because
Yeah.
that is a big theme in your book that your
Yes.
character, your main character gets handed a novel she doesn't really like and she's thinking of like, well, they want an adaptation. How can we stretch this and make it sort of, and it to me is its own thing. But if it needs the name of that IP attached to get made, okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a big part of why I kind of got inspired to write the book because I had been working in TV development and getting sort of frustrated with the development process where like you're not allowed to just make the thing and have fun with it. You have to
Right.
like spend all this time like talking about it and pitching it and proving it and thinking about what it would be. And then this person wants to have their fingerprints in it. And so they changed it a little. So I thought there was just a lot of room for comedy in that and kind of like a cathartic venting of my own frustrations about that process. So yeah, in my book, you see excerpts of her the show that the protagonist is pitching, and it kind of changes genres from like a crime thriller to like a romance to a sitcom. And yeah, I just wanted to show like what that process is like and how you can kind of make yourself crazy trying to just get something approved
Right.
like any way you can.
So for someone like me who I've worked in the business but I've not sold a TV show, like I've worked adjacent writing about TV shows enough where everything in your book really made sense and made me feel like I was inside the industry. When you're trying to sell this book, like you're talking about selling the show within the book, but even just trying to sell the book to your editor, your publisher, whoever it may be, what line did you have to draw for yourself about like how much to explain how the industry works versus just being able to kind of show it and just trust that your audience
Yeah.
will believe this world?
That's a really good question. Well, one thing, first of all, that I loved about the process of writing a book was in contrast to TV development, with fiction, you have to write the whole thing
Yeah.
before you sell it, which is a downside in some ways, but it also is kind of freeing because you write the thing that you love and that you want to read and you feel is your expression, and then, you sell it and you edit it later and stuff. But you're really, putting the work first, which was really exciting. And I do think in the process of editing, there were a couple of things where my editor was like, wait, can you just like explain how the TV development process is supposed to work before we start with like the comedy of it going wrong?
Right.
So there were definitely some places where I was like, well, everybody knows this. You do like the story area and then the script and then um but yeah, I did realize as I was writing it, like kind of how much I knew about this sort of subculture or
Yeah.
industry that isn't really like, common knowledge, and it was fun to sort of get to explain it and point out the things that are weird and absurd about it.
Yeah. I also really love that because your character Caroline is trying to sell comedy ultimately, and you talk a lot about, or you write a lot about her past work and the shows that she's been on and then the show that she's trying to sell. And in doing that, you ultimately create, I want to say like half a dozen shows, maybe more.
Yeah.
I didn't actually count them and I didn't go into like which ones are the more detailed ones, but like there's so many that feel like they could exist
Oh,
in the
thank
world
you.
of the book, but also in the world of the world. And so I'm wondering if you took anything from your own development process and put it in the book as like, this is a version of a show I was actually trying to make. Let me just throw it in the book. How did that work out? Because like, I would imagine you feel like now you've put all these shows in the book, you can't actually try to sell them as shows. Are you burning ideas or are you just like reorganizing where they live?
Or maybe somebody wants to option one of them and they have to buy all of the IP to get to them.
Okay, fair.
Uh, I didn't use any specific shows that I had pitched, but I
Okay.
think I had developed the muscle of like thinking of show ideas so much that it was kind of fun, and easy for me to come up with like the types of shows that maybe she would have worked on or would have been pitching. And yeah, I just thought it was like sort of a fun way to explore an idea for a paragraph without having to like write the entire show Bible and script and all that stuff. And I think I also tend to believe that like the more ideas you come up with, the more ideas will generate. None of the ideas are like things that I think would be incredible TV shows that I feel the passion to make. So I didn't
Well,
worry too much about burning any of them.
okay. I mean, personal feelings aside, I do think a lot of them are very marketable. Like, I do think they
Oh,
would
thank you.
sell. Like, you've got
Yeah.
the one, the book is out, so we could spoil it. People can read it. I always like to pause and say, like, if you haven't read the book yet, you can go get the book and come back to this episode if you feel like I'm saying something that is too much of a spoiler for you. But you put her on a show in one of those smaller rooms called Fulfilled, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
basically like working at a Amazon. I don't think you use the word Amazon. I can't remember exactly, but like it's one of those
Yeah.
warehouse fulfillment centers, and it feels very much like a workplace comedy that could exist, like The Office, like
That is
Superstore,
something
like
that I'm surprised it doesn't exist. Maybe it will exist by the time this episode comes out. But yeah, I think there was something sort of funny that I was trying to get at with that, where like, even like sort of depressing things about the economy
right.
become like a fun workplace comedy. Um,
Which is true. We have a show called DMV right now. Does anyone actually want to work at the DMV? No, but they make it look kind of fun.
yeah. So, look for Fulfilled coming to your screens probably next year.
I set this up when I first started the episode, just talking about the basic premise of the book of her taking notes that she finds that her therapist husband has on a patient and kind of using that in a story pitch. And it's such a specific thing. Her actual note that she finds is also such a specific thing. It's basically that this woman is a teacher and she has this dream, and the dream is that she murders students' parents, cuts them up with a meat grinder, buries them in a garden, and this explodes. Like the people love it when she says it in a pitch meeting. It becomes like not just an aside about a potential character, but like know the actual basis of the show that now she's trying to sell. There's a lot there. Where did you start?
I definitely started with the idea of a TV writer stealing an idea that she's not supposed to know about, that she has access to because of her husband, who's a therapist. So in real life, my husband is a therapist.
Okay, I was not assuming this was autobiographical, by the
It's
way.
not.
Okay.
It's really not, and the plot is not. But but the sort of tension between his job and my job was something that like continually frustrated and amazed me that like he was doing something so morally good and helpful to people, and then on the other side of the wall I was like, what would be a good dick joke? Like um and I was like really doing a lot of development and trying to rack my brain for like stories, like because there's this sort of insatiable appetite in Hollywood for like story ideas,
Yeah.
and you know all these executives would be like, okay, yeah, that's good, what else, what else, what else? And I was like, I'm out of stories. And then my husband would like tell me, like he didn't tell me things about his clients, but like he would sort of allude to little snippets that were like,
Right.
that's an incredible story, like I wish I could use that. So I had this idea for a writer
Mm.
who does sort of use that story, and then it kind of snowballs, and she's been in this funny position of trying to prevent her pitch from selling, which was so opposite from how I felt in real life. So then as I started to think about like, okay, well, what's the thing that she uses? What's the seed? I wanted it to be something that was like kind of so salacious and like juicy that a producer could hear it and be like, that's the show you've got to do. So I was like, okay, it's got to be something murdery, but I didn't want his patient to like actually be a murderer. So then I thought of having it be a dream.
That was one of my questions because I was like, being that it's a dream
Yeah.
makes it all feel a little bit better. If she had stumbled upon notes where it was like, no, confidentially, he would have to report that, first of
Yeah,
all.
if it was
But
something really
also,
illegal.
right, but also like, regardless of whether or not that he reports it and that becomes part of the story, like your story is something very different if your character Caroline finds out this patient murdered someone. She's probably not then gonna go try to meet her at a yoga class, the way that she
Yeah,
does in
and
this book.
my character is really like obsessed with this patient for totally different things from the dream. Like
True.
like like the therapist husband speaks really highly of this patient, and the patient kind of has her own relationship with like ambition and motherhood and stuff that my protagonist is really curious about and interested in, but I wanted the thing that becomes her pitch to be like some other detail. Like it's not the thing that my protagonist is most interested in, it's the thing that Hollywood is most interested in.
Right. And you bring up a really good point because that is another part of the story is just this struggle for Caroline to have a baby or not have a baby, freeze her eggs or not freeze her eggs, which is a very unique way of telling the story too. I think like most people are just talking about getting pregnant. They're not talking about the medical things you sometimes have to do to get pregnant. I don't want to pry, but like how much do you take in all parts of the story from your own opinions or experiences? Because so much of the writer development stuff I just assumed was from a lot of your experience. I didn't assume that of everything
Yeah.
else.
It's a mixture. It's the fears she's having, the anxieties about the decision and the conversations with her partner. A lot of that was inspired by my real life, but I didn't actually freeze my eggs. It was something that at one point I considered, and I was so kind of uncomfortable with it, and like it just felt like this like weird capitalist like solution to
Mm,
figuring out what you actually want, that I know it helps a lot of people and it can be a great thing, but I just had this visceral like I don't want to do it. And so I was like, well, I need to make my character do it.
do you feel like you worked out any of the like I don't want to do it by having her do it? Like,
Oh,
does it feel better?
completely. I mean,
Okay.
I worked out like so much of my own feelings about what I want in my life through this character, because she has a lot of shame about her own ambivalence, and I did too. I was in a place when I started writing the book where my husband really wanted kids and I wasn't sure, and I was like so upset with myself that I wasn't sure, and
Mm,
I it was like really difficult and hard to just like sit with not knowing and with my fears about, well, will I just be a mom and my career will go away and da 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 da. And then weirdly, like when I started writing the book, I felt like I had more patience to think about those fears and unpack them and figure out how I really felt, when it was a character rather than
interesting.
when it was myself. So it
Yeah.
was it was really helpful. And I also wanted to leave her, potential spoiler incoming, leave her in a place where she still wasn't sure,
Hmm.
because I kind of hate when like you read a book or something about someone who doesn't know about kids and then the end is like, and now I have my perfect baby. Or like now I'm happily child free, and it's like, but then what about me? Like,
Right.
So I just wanted to show somebody who is in that stage of not knowing and who manages to get to a place where she still doesn't know, but she's able to have more patience with herself, more compassion with
Right.
herself, around that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I think a lot of people don't know for a really long time. And I think like you don't want to take your own choice away, so you don't want to take your character's choice away.
Yeah.
Like there's still time and options. And so like that's a very valid thing to show people is like you don't need to decide definitively today most of the time. I'm sure there are some exceptions to that rule, and I'm sure people will yell at me online about like, well, in this case, okay,
Right.
yes, sometimes. Um, the other thing you talked about her obviously needing to have more patience with herself and talking about her ambition, but what I also found really interesting was like there was this like layer of guilt that she started to feel when she did take the dream and into the work, and obviously she didn't tell her husband about it, or obviously spoiler, she didn't tell her husband about it right away. He kind of finds out about it in a very Hollywood way, which I loved. But and this may be just me, I feel like there shouldn't be guilt. And I'm
Really?
wondering, yeah, and I'm wondering if you put the guilt in there because it felt natural to you, or if you felt like most readers would think this woman should feel bad for this because she's not telling her own story, but she's
Yeah,
not really telling this other person's story either. She's
that's true.
creating a new character with an idea of this one dream that she only has a few words context for.
Yeah,
So to me, that's very different from then saying like, even sitting down with someone and they're telling you the full story. She wasn't in the therapy session. She didn't hear the full thing. I don't know. I also have things around this because a long time ago I was trying to pitch a show based on something that happened to someone I knew and he knew about it, but he wasn't involved. And so like I am also like I didn't want to feel guilty for telling somebody else's story, so I don't want her to feel guilty. You know what I mean? So maybe it is
yeah.
me, but I just talk a little bit about where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, I have so much to say about this question, but I think you're right in picking up on the idea that what she actually does is not so bad. She sees this note like almost by accident, and then she mentions it by accident, and like it's not really her fault, but the amount that she lies about it after the fact, I think then introduces this sort of distrust into her marriage, and she meets this
Mm.
woman under false pretenses. So like
That's true.
she's doing some stuff that like isn't really on the up and up. And I also think that a lot of her guilt is um kind of misplaced self-hatred or
Yeah.
guilt about not giving her husband a kid, or like she's got a lot of shame and anxiety, and this ends up being the place where it all kind of goes
Yeah.
to.
That's
And
the thought.
yeah, and then it's kind of like this window into or pathway into getting her into these kind of larger than life like shenanigans and like farcical situations, which, to bring it back to Clue, like I love a farce. I love people like running around trying to hide their secrets, because that feeling of like I hope I'm not going to be found out as an
Mm.
imposter who
Hmm.
doesn't deserve my career success, or somebody that like my husband, if he knew what I really wanted in life, he would leave me, or like any of these reasons. I feel like so many of us have this kind of fear of like, well, when they really get to know me, they're not going to like it. And that's the feeling that she's dealing with, but it's sort of externalized into like this big secret that she's keeping, even
Yeah.
though the seed of the secret is not so bad.
Right. But I do also think that everything you're saying does speak back to you have this great section in the book that she writes down reasons why I'm a professional failure. And I do feel like that you're speaking right now to like the guilt and the shame and the imposter syndrome. I feel like speaks perfectly to that setup of that list. And I'm going to be honest, and I feel like a lot of these are universal in a lot of ways. Like you are obviously writing about a TV writer, and so there are some things that are specific, like ageism in Hollywood is very different from probably ageism in a lot of other industries. But so many, I wrote a few of these down because I was like, oh, I've experienced this. I feel like a lot of people have experienced this. The one that I love the most was not enough life experience to write about. Because for a writer, like they always tell you, write what you know.
Yeah,
And if you can't, then maybe that's what happens and you take this other person's
yeah,
idea
exactly.
and it explodes. But that to me was such an interesting thing to see, just like in black and white,
Yeah.
coming from a writer, you, but also coming from a character who's a writer saying, I feel like I don't have enough experience to write about.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could also be its own, I don't know, I feel like there's so much to explore with that. And I think you do in subtle ways in the book, but she obviously put her through so many experiences that I almost at the end of the book was expecting her to sell her own story as a show, which would have, I feel like, been a very Hollywood ending. And did that ever cross your mind to consider, or was that like too far?
Specific idea didn't really cross my mind, but I do think I wanted her to break free of Hollywood a little bit. The book is not meant to be like a takedown of Hollywood, but I think like that list, even that you're talking about, like it's reasons why I'm a professional failure, but like she's not. Like this is
True.
a character who has worked on hit TV shows and like she's making a living from it, but she feels like a failure because I think that's like what the industry can kind of do to you sometimes. If you're not like on top of the world, then you're in the garbage heap. And and she's kind of gotten this way of thinking throughout the book, especially in those beginning sections, where she's like really devaluing herself, because of the way Hollywood has kind of taught her that she's like replaceable or, her life experience is not that important or that valuable. And so by the end of the book, I think it would have felt maybe wrong to me to have her double down and just be a Hollywood
Hmm.
success because that's what she's chasing for so long, but it's not really what she needs as a person. I think what she needs is to kind of learn to respect herself more as a person and an artist, outside of the external validation of like, Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah. But throughout all of that, because so much of what she's doing is still steeped in Hollywood, there's also a section where we see the show that she is working on, it's going through the notes process. And this maybe goes back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of like how much did you feel like you had to explain to the audience? It's all done
Yes.
through correspondence, emails, and texts. And like what I found really interesting, please tell me if this is true to your experience, is that she's taking their notes and she is making the changes, some of them absurd, that they're asking for.
Yep.
And I always thought, and maybe this is why I never sold the show successfully, but I always felt like you can't take every single note because it shows that you're too malleable and you don't really know what you're trying to make. And they clearly don't know what they're trying to make. So maybe it's 90-10, maybe it's 80-20. I'm not asking you to do any math, but I'm wondering how much of that was like for the humor of the situation versus like, no, 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 you really need to take their notes and show them why their note is bad. And then spend all that time doing free labor basically writing new versions of this show that are never going to get made, which sounds insane.
I think there is a big piece of the job that is being a good collaborator. And often that means trying things that you don't feel are the best thing because your work is dependent on all these gatekeepers to exist and you need to have them on your side and on your team. I do think in reality, I probably wouldn't have taken every single note, but Caroline, especially has kind of like lost faith in her own voice and I think she's willing to like do whatever it takes to get the show made. So yeah, it was probably exaggerated for comedic effect, but she's very concerned with like being seen as, somebody who is humble and easy to
Hmm.
work with and like, oh, I'm just happy to be given the chance. I'm just happy to be here, which does feel like an attitude that I felt like pressured to take on. Like you want to be somebody who is good to work with because there's so many talented writers, that it's not really enough
Yeah.
to be like good enough at writing. You have to also be somebody that people want to work with. Um, and hopefully that involves a give and take and an honest discussion about what you think the project needs. But sometimes it does mean just like, okay, I'm gonna take their note and we'll see if they like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I listed some of your credits. I didn't list all of your credits when I was introducing you. What show, if any, that you've worked on do you feel like was the most helpful in writing the fake stuff in this book? Good or bad? You don't even have to say good or
When you
bad,
say
but
the
just
fake stuff, Do you mean like those emails or
I
like
mean,
what
all
the
of it, just
TV
like
show?
creating this world where she's working on I mean, fake in the sense of these are not real shows that exist in our world, but
Yeah.
like she's living in this version of Hollywood. Was there a show that you had worked on that lent itself either to the creation of those fake shows and that world, or just the idea of the style, the tone, the humor? Because there's a moment where you do compare the show that she was trying to write when she had the book. The book was called The Bartender's Guide: The Living, Laughing, and Dying Alone. A Bartender's Guide to Living, Laughing, and Dying Alone. Sorry, I don't know what I just said. And she's trying to adapt it into a script, and she says like it kind of goes from a cheer style workplace into something that's like Party Down meets Dead to me. And I was like, or maybe I don't know. It was all just very specific in a way that I was like, this has to be coming from a real place.
Oh, interesting. No, that particular show wasn't, but and I don't think there was any one show I've worked on that was like the direct inspiration, but when you're working on shows and pitching shows and very aware of like all the shows that are staffing and you come to sort of recognize the way that shows are talked about where they're like given these comps where they'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
like it's Girls Five Eva, but like with the characters of The Sopranos or what, like that's just how people sort of
Yeah.
do that like TV math. So I wanted to reference that and honestly, in writing the sections where she's developing her show idea, I just kind of imagined that I was developing that show idea. So I was sitting there going like, oh, okay, like what if it's well, like if I was faced with this IP, because I was getting sent a lot of like romancy
Mm,
IP, like books and stuff, where I was like, is this just because I'm a woman? Like I'm a comedy writer. Like
probably.
this isn't my thing. So I wanted that to be like the initial thing she sent. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, well, if I got sent this and I was trying to make it something I would be interested in writing, like what would I do? And as I was writing it, I was like, oh no, that's kind of a little too similar to Party Down or to Dead
Hmm.
to Me. And like it was just sort of kind of going through the process of like how my brain works when I'm trying to think of a new TV idea. And you so often get excited about something and then you're like, oh, it's been done. Like
Right,
that's this show.
right. So then I do want to take it back because you originally asked me if I meant the notes. So yes, did any of those notes reflect any real notes you've been
Sure.
given?
Oh, sure.
How bad are have the notes, I guess, that you've been given
Um,
compare to these?
Not on shows that I've been in a room for, but in developing my own projects, none of which have made it to screen. I've been given a lot of notes, and most of the notes that she gets are specific to the actual show.
Yeah.
But there are one or two sentences in there that I threw in just as sort of like Easter eggs to myself. Like, what is this show saying politically about like
Hmm.
othering? Was a note I got on something that like wasn't about politics at all. And just like there's just there's just some things where you're like, this isn't about my show. This is about like whatever your like studio mandate is or your mission
Yeah.
statement that you need to like kind of cover your ass about.
Or also, I think sometimes like they're thinking a few steps ahead and they're like, what will people talk about or write about? And if depending on when you were pitching it, like there was a time when I worked for a magazine where 90% of our online had to have Trump in it for SEO purposes. And so like
Oh,
and it wasn't political news. It was like,
yeah.
well, who's talking about Trump today? We're going to write up all the View. We're going to write up all the late nights. We're going to do breakouts on all the SNL monologue, cold opens and monologues and stuff. And it wasn't a mandate from that place. It was just like we started to see that that's what was getting the most traffic. And so that's what people were talking about. And then suddenly you turn around and you ask everybody on the red carpet for their opinion. And so like that's something that I was thinking about a lot, actually, just simply when I was reading the early part of your novel where she like takes this idea and she like says it in the pitch, but she doesn't really think anybody will ever know because whoever hears the pitch other than these people in the room. And I'm like, right. But if this show makes it and you get to TCA or you get to be on a red carpet, everyone's going to ask you, like, where'd the idea come from?
Sure.
And so then what do? Do you
Yeah.
lie? Like, maybe. And like that, I mean, that character didn't seem like she would have wanted to. But she was, as you mentioned previously, like doing things that it kind of mushroom clouded out.
Yeah,
She may have had to. So that was really fascinating to me about just this idea of like, you have to think so far ahead sometimes in
definitely.
all of
You
it.
have to think so far ahead, but you have to hold that in your mind at the same time as you have realistic expectations about how much of a likelihood is it that it's actually going to get made. And
Okay.
there's, I think, a couple points in the book where she's thinking to herself like, "Oh God, if this show gets made, like I'm going to be in real trouble." But then
Right.
she's kind of like, "But it's not going to get made." Like it takes so many steps of approval, and I think the thing that she really wants to get to is the stage where she gets paid,
Of
which is still
course.
like many steps ahead of when it actually would be on people's screens. So
Yeah.
so yeah, you do have to really be able to imagine and plan for the scenario where your show is on TV, but you're also playing the short game of like, how do I just get to the next step in the development process?
Which is probably the healthy way to think about this and to,
Or just
just
a self-protective way after you've dealt with like a couple of years of rejection and disappointment.
yeah, but that to me is healthier. Like if you're daydreaming in the clouds about like I'm gonna be on stage accepting my Emmy for this show that I'm still getting these weird notes on, like you're not really doing the work of creating the show that would then get the Emmy because you're focusing on the wrong things and you're like looking at projection of, as you said, something that may never come. And I feel like sometimes then like the work actually, maybe then you're just like, I'll just take all the notes because maybe they're going to help me make that show. But it's like, but then you're making a different show that maybe not,
Yeah, it's
won't
very
be
easy to
good.
lose track of what, initially excited you about the idea and what, if it were to be on TV, you would actually feel the most proud about.
Yes, that is a good point. So I mentioned this earlier, just in terms of like all of the shows that you've created within the world. Outside of the show that she's pitching, whether it was a show that she worked on or just like one of the other ones that you referenced that other people were working on, did you start to develop favorites? Did you start to develop like I want to work this up more or like
Yeah.
I'm like interested in this little sub story here. Could you pick one of
Um,
those where you feel like maybe not that you would actually pitch it or like could
yeah.
see it on TV, but just that you had a fondness for?
I definitely had a soft spot for this made-up show I wrote that she worked on called Rudolpho, which
Yes.
was like um set in like a old-timey circus freak show like on Coney Island in the like 20s. And I was just looking for something I think that would be like kind of a critical darling, um and that was like really pure comedy, so that I wanted to demonstrate that she had had some cool jobs with like real
Mm,
like joke writing chops, and and that were kind of like zany and silly and different from what she's being asked to pitch. But as I was like thinking about what the show would be, I was like, okay, well, who would the characters be? Oh, there's the contortionist, and then there's the like two-headed guys, and like I was just having a lot of fun, like thinking about like what episodes could be like,
right.
that I was enjoying myself.
And that is one that like you do put those details into the book. Like that does come up in what
Right.
felt
Which
like
like
an organic way.
or maybe self-indulgent. Like I don't know that
Oh,
I needed to describe all of them, but I wanted to give people a sense of like what her work history had been like.
right. Well, the reason I'm saying that is because like not everyone did have that level of detail in the book, but did you feel like you needed to create that level of detail for them outside of the book just to make them feel real to you? Or was it okay that some of them were just like a title that we mentioned once in a while?
Definitely some of them could just be a title. And I think it depended on the context they were appearing in. Like some of them were just like kind of a brief mention to be funny, and then some of them like that show, like it was sort of a way into a flashback of an experience she had had in a writer's room. And to get into that experience, I kind of wanted to set the tone for like what the show was like, what were
Mm,
maybe some of the challenges of working on that show, and like who the other people were that she was working in the room with. And so it felt like important that the reader knew a little bit more about what kind of show this was,
sure.
which meant I got to play around in that world a little bit more.
All right, you have this part in the book that you're probably going to hate that I'm doing this, but it's at a party. It's a circle of couples, and they're all just talking about what they're watching. And like
Oh
you
yeah.
make it a point in the book to be like, to have Caroline kind of stop and be like, this is bad. Like, we're people, we should be talking about other things. But
Yeah.
I find it so true. Like, I don't go to a lot anymore, but when I was going to like all the Emmy parties and stuff, like, inevitably we would just be talking about things that were our work.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you, what are you watching?
Oh,
I
I
mean,
thought you
I
were gonna
want to
ask
talk
what
about
I've
that
seen.
sequence too, but let's start with what are you watching?
God, what am I watching? I mean, it's different all the time. So this episode's gonna come out and this will already be an obsolete
That's
answer.
true
But
because we are recording this in March and we will be putting this out on April 7th when your pub
okay.
day is.
I'm watching Survivor 50. I'm watching The Pit. I'm actually rewatching Euphoria season 2 in advance of the new
Okay.
season coming out. Um, yeah, I'm watching Drops of God, which is this very
Yeah.
strange Apple show.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's a good cross section of stuff though that you have there because that's
Yeah,
a little bit of everything, drama,
and I'm watching
reality.
I'm watching Mad About You, which is just like this self-harm exercise that my husband and I have been engaging in because it's a very old-fashioned sitcom that maybe doesn't entirely hold up, but
Oh,
we're going all the way through it. We
you
we
know,
often have an old show we just finished rewatching all of Seinfeld.
mm.
Now we're doing Mad About You, and it's a lot of them trying to leave the apartment.
Yes, I would say like I rewatched it recently and I didn't feel like it didn't hold up. I mean, it's
It's not that
and
it doesn't hold up.
I say that
It's
joke
just
wise. Like they're not out there making like homophobic
it's just
jokes
a
and
little
stuff.
slower. No, no, no. It's not like that. It's just it's more slowly
Yeah.
paced than I'm used to in a sitcom. And I think that was maybe more the speed of things back in the 90s when there were like 3 shows you could watch.
No, that's true because there have been a few things that I've tried to rewatch from that time that I'm like, this is too slow even for me. So I guess back then I didn't notice it because it was what most of them were doing. But now I'm like, I don't know. My brain has definitely changed as time has gone on and like now everything I'm still sitting here scrolling on dog Instagram while I'm watching something so like my brain is gone
Yeah.
but I do also obviously want to talk to you about putting that sequence in the book because I do feel like that sequence the scene really marries the two worlds of the book really well, like her at home husband and like marriage, everything that they're going through with that world of Hollywood. And like, I really was curious about what it must be from his perspective too, like going to these parties where, and you kind of touch on this in the book, but like, you know, he has, and you mentioned this earlier in the discussion, like he has this real job and it's an important job, and like everyone's out there talking about nonsense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Just talk me through, I guess, a little bit about like the decision to
Yeah.
include this part.
Definitely something that I noticed with my husband when, we first moved out to LA. Um, like we would hang out with my TV writing friends and he would come home being like, everyone was just doing bits the whole time. Like I felt like we were on a podcast. And I was like, oh, I thought that was just normal. But he's very funny. He can hang. The thing about just talking about what TV shows you're watching, I think was something I really started to notice more coming out of the pandemic. And hard to say if it was the pandemic or if it was just me getting older,
Mm,
but it felt like I was no longer having experiences. I was just talking about what content I was watching. And it was so just dystopic and depressing to me that I would hang out with my friends and we would just be like, "Oh yeah, have you seen this? Have you seen that?" Like it yeah, and I don't want to say that I have more interesting things to talk about or I'm better than that because I was doing it too. I am doing it too. And I've actually even in the years since writing that kind of gotten more used to it and now it feels more normal to just be talking about what TV I'm watching.
yeah.
But it still is a little depressing.
Well, that's what I found like really interesting about it because I'm in a bubble of people who work in this business. I don't know if it's normal for people who work outside of this business
Yeah.
to also do that. But I do feel like it does say a lot about how much time you're spending creating your own content, sure, but then also like you kind of have to know what's going on in the business in order to keep up, in
Yeah.
order to try to sell your next show. Well, what is selling right now? What do we think the trend will be in 5 months? Like all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it does feel more important than I think a lot of people think about it when like a surface level, what are you watching versus what are you watching when you're in the business? But
Right.
at the same time, I agree with you. I think like the pandemic we couldn't do anything. So we were binge. Would Tiger
Yeah.
King have been the most
Oh God.
popular show if we could have gone outside and done other things? No, I don't think anybody would have watched it. But we were all stuck there. So we were all like, let's see this crazy thing. So
Yeah.
then now, I mean, I still have friends that don't really go out a lot because of masking and things like that, or just events haven't all fully come back crazily enough 4 years later. But 5 years later, oh my God, 5 years later,
X. Yeah.
2026. So yeah, so I'm not trying to say that like it's not an important discussion, but it just felt so specific again that I was like, this is a really interesting way to bring these worlds together and to also kind of acknowledge like how he feels about this versus how she feels about this because they are kind of in very different worlds,
Yeah.
even though they're sharing a space at home, a workspace at home.
I think you're right too that there is a different feeling when you're talking about what TV are you watching with like your parents or friends not in the business, and it's almost more interesting
Yeah.
and substantive to talk about it with people who are in the business because then it can so easily turn into like gossip.
Oh, I
Or
thought you were going to say the opposite because I find when I ask my friends, I have a few friends from like long ago that
Mhm.
don't live in LA that or have moved out of LA. And when I ask them, it feels like I'm talking to like actual people who they have
Right.
limited time, so they're giving the things that are worth their
Yeah.
time. Whereas when I talk to my friends who do this for a living, it's like they
They're
have
watching
to
everything.
watch it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I got paid to watch TV for a million years.
Yeah.
Would I have watched that if I didn't? No. Now that I'm not really doing that job anymore, I'm watching way less. So it feels to me like I guess like 6 to 1, right?
Yeah.
Like they're both
It can
good for
go
their
either
own
way
reasons.
because sometimes people in the industry like will have a more interesting take on it because they kind of are more trained to
Yeah.
look at things critically. But sometimes it's like, oh, you just don't like that because you're jealous or whatever.
Yeah. Or
Um,
my favorite thing, I won't watch certain things if I know that person should have been Me Too'd, but we didn't have enough legally to get them.
right.
That's my
Sometimes we know
favorite
too
thing.
much.
Yeah, yeah. I can't end on that note. That's a downer note. So because the book itself deals with so many individual shows, and I did ask you this of Clue. Do you feel like you would be up for an adaptation either of the book or for any of these individual shows? How do you feel about like if somebody said to you like, "Hey, you now have all of this IP," or would you want to see it done for screen and would you want to be the one to do it for screen?
For the main book,
Any of it.
I mean, I think it would be most fun probably to take like a tiny little, show within a show, like one of the ones they talk about at that party, or like the show Octopocalypse that is about like octopuses taking over the world or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because I always think it's more fun to work on something new. Um, of course, if somebody wanted to adapt the book for a show or movie, I'm here. I am listening. You can reach out anytime. I would be happy to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that what's nice about a book is when you've written it, it exists, and it's not like it's a script or a screenplay where it's like a blueprint for something else, and I have to
Mm,
wait for somebody to give me the money to make it and put it on the screen. It's like, so if this is the end of my journey with this story, I will be totally at peace.
yeah. But it sounded like you didn't want to adapt it. Like you're comfortable having somebody else take yours, like, because just based on the
Maybe.
experience you wrote,
Yeah.
she's taking somebody else's book
Yeah.
and completely
Well,
changing it.
I think adaptations are really interesting and tricky and hard, and I always watch them, and I think it's really difficult to do an adaptation that isn't just like a shot for shot remake of the book or the source
Yeah,
material and is actually adding something new, but then you have to figure out what is the new thing that you didn't get to say with the book. So I would definitely have to like think about it and come up with like an angle and like why should this be a show rather than just a book.
that's
Because
fair.
I'm pretty critical of adaptations when I see them
No,
because
I
so
am too.
often
I
I
but
get
I had
attached
to
to the,
ask.
the first version. Um, but yeah, if someone wants to pay me to do it, I will make a kick-ass adaptation.
And you won't pretend to lose your notes on that pitch Zoom.
Exactly. No, I will
Yes.
I will try hard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you,
And
Danielle.
As everybody knows, I like to leave you guys where to find the things that we talked about in the episodes. So, Clue is streaming on Pluto TV and MGM Plus, and then as of today, you can get Like This But Funnier wherever you get your books. Is there a particular place you want to steer them that's better for you if they get it there?
No, I follow your heart. Do what you think is right. If that means not shopping at the one place, then that's great. But yeah, anywhere you get your books.
Okay, well, thank you again to Hallie for coming on Made Possible by Pop Culture, the podcast. And thank you all for listening to it and or watching it. Don't go anywhere just yet, though, because my episodes normally drop on Tuesdays, but tomorrow, Wednesday, April 8th, I am delivering a second episode of the week, a bonus episode, if you will, and it is about an adaptation. See how I bridged the end of this episode into that one. So here's the thing. I love books. I said at the start of the season, I wanted to have more people on to talk about books. This episode is the start of that run. So get ready, strap in. There's lots more to come. And you know what? I'll just tell you tomorrow's episode is about the Testaments. Bruce Miller, creator and showrunner of that show, will be on as my special guest. He was also the creator and showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale for most of its run. The Testaments is the follow up to The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood's novel. She wrote both of those books. He's doing both of the shows, and the first three episodes of The Testaments drop on Hulu tomorrow. So we're going to have a discussion about those three episodes pretty much right after they drop. You're not going to want to miss it.